Something has moved through here. Oh my, look at this. Holy look at.
Bigfoot is not just big in stature. For some, it's also big business. There's long been a thriving economy built around the legend. Of course, we're a part of that.
10 years later, Hunter finds remains and a chilling photo. You know, when you head into the wilderness chasing legends, you expect adventure, a brush with danger, maybe even a thrilling campfire story to tell your friends. But what you don't expect is to become the subject of a decade-long mystery. Yet, in the unforgiving terrain of northwest Idaho, the line between adventure and tragedy blurred. Imagine this: a hunter, trudging through the dense, rugged Sawtooth Wilderness in April 2020, comes across a scene that looks like something out of a nightmare. Amid the remote valleys, hidden by thick vegetation, lie skeletal remains. Nearby, there are scattered personal items: a weathered backpack, a pair of dusty binoculars, a tattered sleeping bag. These objects, left to endure the elements for nearly a decade, whisper of a story long forgotten. Among them is an old, corroded camera, its casing rusted and worn but still intact. What secrets could it possibly hold? When investigators recover the memory card, they find a single photo that sends shivers down their spines. But before we delve into the chilling image, we need to rewind and piece together the eerie tale of the man behind these remains.
In that film that has arms and legs, in terms of the limb ratios, the speed, the stride length, nothing can be determined from that film. There's not enough data in it.
The hunt that went wrong. It all began in September 2010, a time when the air in the mountains was crisp, the black-tailed deer were in their prime, and the Seven Devils Mountains loomed large, as ominous as their name suggested. Todd Hofflander, a seasoned outdoorsman, had prepared meticulously for a 4-day hunting trip. With him were essentials: camping gear, a .357 Magnum revolver for protection, and his ever-loyal black Labrador, Ruby. He wasn't going in alone either. His friend Jeff, an enthusiastic but less dependable outdoorsman, had joined him. Together, they set out to conquer the wilderness, their sights set on bagging game and soaking in the majestic views of Hell's Canyon. The Seven Devils Mountains were notorious for their jagged peaks, unstable terrain, and haunting reputation. Locals told tales of strange occurrences, whispers of shadows moving just out of sight, and an unsettling silence that seemed to hang over certain valleys. But for Todd, these were merely stories. He wasn't one to scare easily. As an experienced mountaineer, he trusted his instincts and preparation. For the first 2 days, everything went as planned. The pair scouted trails, camped under the stars, and explored the rugged beauty of the Sawtooth Wilderness. But on the 3rd day, the adventure took a dark turn. Todd began to complain of severe knee pain, a debilitating issue that made trekking through the dangerous terrain nearly impossible. Jeff, unwilling to cut the trip short, proposed a solution. They would split up. Todd would remain at a spot to rest, while Jeff continued the hunt. Jeff assured Todd he'd return by nightfall, bringing along his father, Steve, for additional help. When Jeff and Steve made their way back to the ridge later that evening, Todd was gone. There was no note, no sign of struggle, just an empty campsite and an uneasy silence. Suspicion and a string of dead ends. Todd's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the small, close-knit community. A massive search effort was launched almost immediately, with helicopters scouring the skies and search dogs combing through the dense underbrush. Volunteers from nearby towns joined the effort, their voices echoing through the mountains as they called out Todd's name. Yet, days turned into weeks, and there was no trace of him, no footprints, no discarded gear, no clues to suggest where he might have gone. As the search stretched on with no results, the focus shifted to Jeff, the last person to see Todd alive. Authorities grilled him for details, but his story began to show cracks. Inconsistencies in his account raised red flags, and when he was subjected to a polygraph test, he failed. This only deepened suspicions. Was Jeff withholding something? Todd's wife, Julie, added fuel to the fire when she spoke with investigators. She painted a troubling picture of Jeff, describing him as unreliable, short-tempered, and prone to making cruel jokes. He had a history of teasing Todd relentlessly, often belittling him in front of others. There were even whispers of Jeff's aggressive behavior toward animals, including his own dog. But troubling as these details were, they didn't amount to evidence. The questions surrounding Jeff lingered, but without concrete proof, the investigation stalled. Then, weeks after Todd's disappearance, something unexpected happened. A couple hiking in the area came upon Ruby, Todd's beloved Labrador. The dog was alive, miraculously unharmed aside from mild dehydration. Her survival seemed almost impossible. How had she managed to endure the wild without food or protection? Yet, something about her was deeply unsettling. When search teams brought Ruby back to the area in the hopes she might lead them to Todd, her behavior changed. She trembled violently, barked at nothing, and whined as if in fear. It was as though she sensed something sinister in the mountains. Even with Ruby's return, the search led nowhere. The wilderness kept its secrets, and by October 2010, authorities officially called off the operation. The case was closed, Todd's fate unknown. The mountains, it seemed, had swallowed him whole. But the discovery of Todd's remains and that haunting photo in 2020 would breathe new life into the mystery, raising more questions than answers. What had happened to Todd Hofflander in the remote, forbidding Seven Devils Mountains? And what was the true nature of the danger that had been waiting for him in the wilderness? A chilling discovery. Fast forward to April 2020. A hunter exploring the valleys near the Bernard River made a grim discovery. A set of human bones later confirmed to be Todd's. His belongings, including that old camera, were scattered nearby. But his revolver? Nowhere to be found. The corroded camera became the key to unraveling what might have happened. Investigators managed to salvage the memory card, and the photos they recovered were disturbing. The last image was so shocking it left everyone who saw it shaken. While authorities have never publicly revealed the photo, rumors suggest it showed something, or someone, watching Todd in the wilderness. So, what happened to Todd? Was it an accident? A wild animal attack? Or, as some believe, something far stranger? The Sawtooth Mountains have long been steeped in folklore, with sightings of strange figures and whispers of Bigfoot adding a layer of mystery to the case. Some theorists speculate Todd captured something on that camera he wasn't supposed to see, something that didn't want to be found. Others wonder if Jeff knew more than he let on. And then there's the chilling possibility that Todd met his end at the hands of someone, or something, that still roams those mountains. This story doesn't end with closure, only questions. What was in that photo? Why did Ruby act like the mountains were haunted? And most importantly, what really happened to Todd Hofflander? The wilderness holds its secrets close. Some might say a little too close. The haunting legacy of Devil's Mountain. The case of Todd Hofflander has left an unerasable mark on the collective imagination. A tragic tale woven with mystery, fear, and unanswered questions. His remains, discovered a decade after his disappearance, seemed to hold whispers of the horrors he might have endured. Yet for all the evidence recovered, a backpack, binoculars, a sleeping bag, and a corroded camera, so much remains shrouded in uncertainty. It is this void of answers that fuels endless speculation and keeps the story alive, a chilling reminder of the wilderness's unforgiving and mysterious nature. When Todd's camera was discovered, investigators worked painstakingly to salvage its memory card. Most of the photos were exactly what one would expect: sweeping landscapes, breathtaking vistas of the Seven Devils Mountains, and snapshots of Todd's black Labrador Ruby by his side. But there was one photo that stood out. A single image that defied explanation. It was blurry, as if taken in haste, and captured what appeared to be a towering, shadowy figure in the distance. The shape was indistinct, but its presence was unmistakably menacing. Todd, a man known for his composure and experience in the wild, seemed to have been in a state of panic when he took it. The fact that this was the last image on the camera suggests he may have been attacked, or worse, immediately after. The recovered photo added an unsettling layer to an already disturbing case. Online communities and armchair detectives latched onto the image, speculating about its implications. For some, it was clear evidence of the supernatural, a cryptid perhaps, or the infamous grassman, a creature that has long been the subject of folklore in the region. Described as a large, hairy humanoid with shaggy, grass-like fur, glowing eyes, and a foul odor, the grassman is said to stand between 7 and 8 feet tall and weigh over 500 pounds. Eyewitness accounts describe its terrifying roar and aggressive behavior, especially toward those traveling alone at night. Could this creature have been responsible for Todd's death? Theories abound, each more chilling than the last. Some believe the grassman stalked Todd, its glowing eyes the source of Ruby's terror when she returned to the wilderness with authorities. The area where Todd's remains were found, lush with vegetation and near a water source, matches the conditions in which such a creature might thrive. Moving Todd's body such a great distance, miles from the meeting point, would require immense strength. Another detail that points to something beyond the ordinary. But not everyone is convinced by tales of cryptids and supernatural predators. Many argue that the answers lie closer to home, perhaps with Jeff and his father, who were the last people to see Todd alive. The discrepancies in Jeff's statements, his failed polygraph test, and his dubious history paint a troubling picture. Todd's wife, Julie, described Jeff as a manipulative and aggressive man, prone to mocking Todd and making inappropriate comments. Could a hunting accident have spiraled into a cover-up? Perhaps the missing revolver, which Todd would have carried with him at all times, was deliberately hidden to erase evidence of foul play. The rugged, heavily forested terrain where Todd's remains were found would have made it difficult for search teams to locate a staged scene. Yet even this theory struggles to explain everything. Why would Jeff risk transporting Todd's body so far from the meeting point? How did Ruby, the only living witness, survive in the wild for weeks without a collar or pack, seemingly unharmed but visibly shaken? Another possibility is that Todd fell victim to the brutal realities of the wilderness. The Seven Devils Mountains, with their unstable rock formations and unpredictable weather, have claimed lives before. If Todd attempted to leave the campsite due to an approaching predator or other perceived danger, he may have been injured in a fall or struck by falling rocks. The dog, perhaps scared by the incident, could have fled the scene. Survival instincts and access to the remaining supplies in Todd's backpack might explain how Ruby endured the ordeal. And yet, the recovered photo refuses to be dismissed so easily. For those who believe in the supernatural, it is the smoking gun of the case, the one piece of evidence that suggests Todd encountered something beyond human understanding. What's most haunting is imagining Todd's final moments, the fear he must have felt, the courage it took to raise his camera, the split second in which he captured the image. Was he trying to warn us? Or did he simply want someone, anyone, to know what happened to him? In the end, Todd's story is a tragic blend of human error, natural hazards, and perhaps something more. His remains were found in a place aptly named Devil's Mountain, and the legacy of his disappearance has only reinforced the eerie reputation of the area. Whether the answers lie in cryptid legends, human betrayal, or the cruelty of nature, one thing is clear: the wilderness holds its secrets tightly, and Todd's fate may never be fully understood. For those left behind, including Jeff, who must live with the guilt of leaving Todd alone, the unanswered questions are a burden that will never fade. The wilderness took Todd Hofflander, and with him, it claimed its truth. How Bigfoot got its name. For those of you wondering, the name Bigfoot has its roots in a peculiar discovery made in August 1958. Jerry Crew, a construction worker in Eureka, California, came across enormous footprints at his worksite in the remote woods. These weren't just large, they were massive, far beyond the size of any human or animal known to inhabit the area. Fascinated Crew made a plaster cast of one of the prints and brought it to the local newspaper, Humboldt Times. The paper published the story and coined the term Bigfoot to describe the mysterious creature that could have left such gigantic tracks. The name captured the public's imagination almost instantly, becoming synonymous with tales of elusive, hairy giants lurking in the wilderness. For a time, the story of Bigfoot captivated readers and fueled speculation about an undiscovered creature living in the forests of Northern California. Crew's plaster cast became an iconic symbol of the Bigfoot legend, with some viewing it as a breakthrough discovery. However, the mystery surrounding these footprints took an unexpected turn decades later, when the truth was finally revealed. Unbeknownst to crew and the public, the tracks were a carefully orchestrated hoax. Ray Wallace, a local prankster and logger, had been the mastermind behind the footprints. Using oversized wooden feet strapped to his boots, Wallace had stomped around the area, creating the impressions that crew would later find. To add to the illusion, Wallace used the weight of his truck bed to press the tracks into the ground, ensuring they appeared deep and authentic without leaving human footprints alongside them. Wallace kept his secret for years, never revealing the truth during his lifetime. It wasn't until after his death in 2002 that his family came forward and admitted the hoax. They shared details of how Wallace had carefully created the fake tracks, turning what began as a local joke into a cultural phenomenon. While some were disheartened to learn the origins of the name Bigfoot, others found the story amusing, viewing it as a testament to the power of myth and storytelling. Ironically, Wallace's fake tracks ended up serving a surprising purpose. They became a reference point for distinguishing hoaxes from genuine evidence. Experts like Jeff Meldrum, who analyze supposed Bigfoot footprints, often use Wallace's crude, stamped impressions as a baseline. The tracks Wallace created lacked the detailed nuances found in natural footprints, features like toe splay, pressure ridges, and the subtle variations in depth and shape caused by a living creature in motion. In contrast, prints like those discovered by Meldrum in the Blue Mountains exhibit these organic details, making them much harder to dismiss. The name Bigfoot may have started as a hoax, but it evolved into something far greater, a symbol of humanity's enduring curiosity about the unknown. Even though its origins were rooted in mischief, the term has become an indelible part of cryptozoological lore, inspiring countless searches, debates, and stories about the elusive giant of the forest. Johnstown Footprint and the Skeptic's Dilemma. In 1980, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, became the site of another mysterious footprint discovery. Locals reported strange noises and an awful smell, alongside a massive 17.75-inch footprint. The Associated Press published a photo of the print, bringing national attention. But, as with other footprint evidence, the association with earlier hoaxes made skeptics dismissive. Despite this, researchers like Meldrum argue that the natural characteristics of genuine Sasquatch prints set them apart from fakes.
Sasquatch has retained the more primitive characteristic of a very flexible instep, a mid-foot flexibility, which can be seen here.
The Patterson-Gimlin film, Bigfoot's Hollywood moment. The Patterson-Gimlin film remains the crown jewel of Bigfoot evidence. In 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin ventured into the woods of Northern California, following reports of Bigfoot sightings. Patterson carried a camera, and when the two encountered a large, ape-like figure, he managed to capture a few seconds of footage. The most iconic frame shows the creature turning to look directly at the camera, a gesture that suggests intelligence and awareness. Skeptics often dismiss the film as a hoax, claiming it was just a man in a costume. But special effects experts disagree. For context, the Planet of the Apes movie released in 1968 showcased the best Hollywood could achieve in ape costumes at the time, and those costumes were far less realistic than the creature in the Patterson-Gimlin film. The movements in the film, fluid and natural, also set it apart from anything a person in a suit could replicate. Another testament to the film's authenticity is Bob Gimlin's unwavering account. Despite disputes with Patterson over unpaid profits and his reluctance to embrace the public spotlight, Gimlin has always maintained that what he saw that day was real. He had nothing to gain, no fame, no money, yet he stuck to his story, which only adds to the film's credibility. Why are Bigfoot sightings so rare? If Bigfoot exists, why don't we see it more often, especially in an era when billions of people carry high-quality cameras? One explanation is that the Sasquatch actively avoids human contact. Even in regions teeming with wildlife, sightings of animals like monkeys are rare because most people don't venture deep into the wilderness. Those who do are not usually searching for Sasquatch. Another reason could be how easily the creature blends into its environment. In one video, for example, 3 dark shapes are visible behind trees, but only one is the supposed Sasquatch. The largest shape to the left isn't the creature, it's the smaller figure in the middle. If the Sasquatch hadn't stood upright, it might have gone unnoticed altogether. Walking on all fours, it could theoretically wander through Times Square and be mistaken for a gorilla. A darker theory: Bigfoot witnesses who never tell their stories. There's a more chilling explanation for the lack of Bigfoot evidence. Each year, over 500,000 people go missing in the United States alone. Could it be that some of these individuals encountered Bigfoot and didn't live to tell the tale? While it's a provocative idea, critics argue it's speculative, akin to stories about the Tooth Fairy. They suggest we focus on available evidence rather than theorizing about why evidence might be missing. Critics often dismiss Bigfoot sightings with alternative explanations. For example, the Jacobs Trail cam photo, which appears to show a young Bigfoot, could easily be a bear suffering from mange. Jeff Meldrum's footprint casts, while fascinating, are often compared to the large footprints of humans like Shaquille O'Neal. A signed pair of Shaq's shoes, auctioned by Pristine Auctions, demonstrates just how massive human feet can be, making it possible for large footprints to belong to exceptionally tall individuals. Even the Patterson-Gimlin film, considered by many to be the most compelling Bigfoot evidence, faces scrutiny. Skeptics argue that while Roger Patterson likely couldn't afford a Hollywood-grade costume, it's even less likely that a bipedal ape has avoided detection for over 50 years. Mythical beings turned real, the case for Bigfoot. Skeptics often claim that if Bigfoot were real, zoologists would have discovered it by now. But history shows that even large, prominent animals have remained hidden from science for centuries. Mountain gorillas, for instance, were considered mythical creatures until the early 1900s. In the 1600s, a British explorer described them as monsters covered in hair, except for the face and hands, with the stature of a giant. Similarly, giant pandas were dismissed as folklore until they were scientifically confirmed in the 20th century. Even then, it took 50 years of sporadic sightings for the species to be fully accepted by science. Every year, scientists discover nearly 18,000 new species, though most are small or microscopic. However, history shows that even massive creatures can evade detection. Given this precedent, it's not entirely unreasonable to consider the possibility of a bipedal ape that avoids human contact and is rarely captured on camera. The lingering mystery. Whether or not you believe in Sasquatch, the absence of concrete evidence doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. As the saying goes, the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence. Bigfoot could be an undiscovered species or simply a myth waiting to become fact, just as gorillas and pandas once were. And Sasquatch isn't the only cryptid to provoke such debates. Consider the Nephilim giants, rumored to inhabit caves in the Solomon Islands. Though they may sound like pure folklore, growing evidence suggests otherwise. The gruesome discovery. A hunter went missing deep in the wilderness. Months later, his remains were found in a horrifying state. And the strangest part was that the evidence around him pointed to something out of a nightmare. On April 27, 2007, after months of searching, a rescue team made a shocking discovery in Minnesota's Beltrami Forest. They found the remains of 38-year-old Corey Kelly, who had been missing for nearly 6 months. What they saw was nothing short of horrifying. His body had been cut in half. His bones were scattered and bleached white from months of exposure. But what made it even stranger were the mysterious photos on his camera. Something about this case wasn't adding up. So how did a skilled hunter end up like this? What really happened out there?
Oh, there he goes.
A hunting trip gone wrong. On October 16, 2006, Corey and his friend, Jim Naprude, set out on a hunting trip in Minnesota's Beltrami Forest. But this wasn't just any forest. It was a vast, dense, and nearly impossible place to navigate, packed with deep swamps, twisting rivers, and thick woods. Even experienced hunters could easily get turned around. Just 16 miles north of the forest sat Lake of the Woods, a massive freshwater lake at the Canadian border. Everyone knew how dangerous this area was. If you were heading into those woods, you needed to be prepared and armed. Corey and Jim weren't amateurs. They were well-equipped, experienced hunters who knew how to survive in the wild. Corey even brought his yellow hunting dog along for the trip. Their main goal? Hunt grouse, a common bird in the area. At around 4 p.m., The two decided to split up to cover more ground, planning to meet back at their campsite by 6:30 p.m. Jim made it back on time, but Corey never showed up. Something felt off. An hour later, Corey did appear, but sweaty, shaken, and out of breath. He admitted he had gotten lost in the forest. Then, he asked Jim a strange question. "Did you smell that awful stench out there?" Jim hadn't noticed anything unusual, but he figured it could have been a rotting deer or moose. Either way, he shrugged it off. They hadn't caught anything that day, and to make matters worse, Jim realized his car was almost out of gas. He told Corey he was heading into town to fill up the tank. Before leaving, he turned to his friend and warned him not to wander off. As Jim drove away, he saw Corey chasing after a grouse just a few feet from the campsite. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, so he kept driving. When Jim returned to the campsite at 9 p.m., he expected to see Corey by the fire, maybe cooking dinner. But the campsite was completely dark and empty. He called out Corey's name. No response. By 11 p.m., panic set in. Grabbing a flashlight, Jim headed into the woods, searching for his friend. He walked for miles, soaked by the damp night air, but there was no sign of Corey. Something was wrong. He needed help. As he made his way back to his car, he noticed something eerie. Two strange figures standing in the woods. They weren't moving, just standing there in the dark, watching him. Jim couldn't see their faces, but something felt off. They weren't carrying guns, which was unusual for hunters in the area. Even more unsettling, a horrible stench filled the air. When Jim asked if they had seen his friend, the strangers barely spoke, only suggesting he contact the authorities. Jim wasted no time. He reported Corey missing, and soon, the Beltrami County Sheriff's Department launched an investigation. The search begins. Authorities wasted no time asking Jim questions. When was the last time he saw Corey? Did Corey seem okay? Did he have any medical issues? Was there any chance he had been drinking or using drugs? Jim explained that Corey wasn't the kind of guy to take big risks. He wasn't reckless, didn't drink much, and wasn't into hard drugs. However, he did take painkillers for an old back injury. Even so, Jim was certain that Corey hadn't just wandered off on purpose. Something had to have gone wrong. There was one issue, though. While Corey was an experienced hunter, he wasn't exactly a survival expert. He knew his way around the woods, but wasn't prepared for the freezing temperatures at night. All he had on was a thin pullover, lightweight pants, gloves, and boots. Not nearly enough to stay warm if he got lost for long. Jim had even given him a compass earlier that day and told him, "If you get turned around again, just head west. You'll hit a trail sooner or later." Corey also had his phone, but with little to no service in the area, it wasn't much help. With Corey missing, police brought in search dogs, using items from both him and his dog Sammy to pick up a scent. Soon, the search kicked into full gear. Hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, and search teams flooded the area, all trying to find any sign of Corey. Days passed with no luck. Then, on October 25th, searchers finally found something. A clue, but not the one anyone expected. It was Sammy. The dog had survived but was in bad shape, skinny, weak, and barely hanging on. Rescuers rushed him to get care, but they also needed to figure out if he held any clues. Samples were taken from his stomach to see if he had eaten anything that could hint at Corey's fate. But the results shocked everyone. There were no signs that Sammy had eaten human flesh. That meant Corey wasn't nearby, or at least not in a way anyone had feared. As search teams kept pushing forward, more of Corey's belongings began turning up. His hat, a lighter, gloves, and a shotgun shell were scattered along a trail. Then, they found something even more unsettling: his sweatshirt. It looked like Corey had spent the night in that spot. A small fire had been burned down to ash, and near it was a lip balm container. But inside, instead of chapstick, there was a small amount of meth. More items were found further down the trail: his overalls, both socks, almost like he had been shedding layers as he moved. But still, there was no sign of Corey himself.
I knew exactly what we had on camera. It was proof to me and my dad, because who on a Tuesday night is a mile and a half into the woods running around with no flashlight?
A deadly mistake. As investigators dug deeper, it became clear that Corey had moved southeast, following a flooded ditch that wound through the dense, swampy forest. Every item he had dropped, his clothes, gear, and small belongings, formed a straight line along this path. But what troubled searchers the most was the way his clothes were scattered. This suggested he had entered a dangerous state known as hypothermia. When a person's body temperature drops too low, the brain can become confused, making them believe they are overheating even while they are freezing. In response, they sometimes begin removing layers of clothing. A deadly mistake. This chilling discovery pointed to a grim possibility. Corey might have collapsed somewhere in the wilderness and hadn't survived. Despite the worsening weather, search teams pushed forward into November. But when winter storms hit, the brutal conditions made the search nearly impossible. Heavy snowfall covered the landscape, hiding any possible clues beneath a thick, icy blanket. Eventually, the search had to be called off until spring. Months later, on April 27, 2007, with the snow finally melted, the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office and Lake of the Woods County resumed their efforts. It didn't take long. Just 2 hours after restarting the search, a helicopter spotted Corey's body in a swampy area hidden by tall grass. The photos showed him lying next to a flooded ditch, his legs in the water. His upper body was still mostly intact, but animals had scattered some of his remains. When searchers reached him, Corey was only wearing jeans, with his boots lying nearby in good condition. Strangely, search teams had previously come within just 15 feet of this spot, but hadn't seen him due to the thick vegetation. He had made it 12 miles into Lake of the Woods County, more than a mile away from the nearest road. But there was one major mystery. His shotgun was missing and was never recovered. The search for Corey had been massive. 62 different agencies, hundreds of volunteers, and over 6,500 hours spent looking for him. But the details surrounding his death were puzzling. Scattered bones nearby had been stripped clean, some even turning white from months of exposure. Investigators were baffled. At first, some suspected he had been attacked or even torn apart. But by what? The autopsy only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of injuries, no broken bones, and no evidence that he had been attacked by an animal. Toxicology tests showed he hadn't taken any drugs, not even common substances like meth or opioids. Other than natural decomposition, nothing explained what had happened to him. But then, there was another strange detail. Corey's boots, which were found nearby, seemed to be the last thing he had removed before he died. Hypothermia can make people act irrationally, but it didn't explain why so many of his belongings were scattered over miles. It was clear he had been walking for hours, but why had he gone in the wrong direction? His friend Jim had told him to head west, yet Corey had gone east. Did he panic? Did he think following the flooded ditch would lead him to safety? It wasn't a terrible idea, but in reality, it took him deeper into the wilderness. His belongings were dropped along the way, but it's impossible to know whether this was due to confusion or if he had been trying to leave a trail for searchers. After traveling 5 miles, he started discarding bigger pieces of clothing. A small campfire was discovered near his discarded belongings, showing that he had at least tried to stay warm. But in such a wet, swampy area, finding dry wood would have been nearly impossible. Even more unsettling was the fact that search teams had come close to finding Corey multiple times. His trail of scattered items practically pointed to where he ended up. Yet for some reason, he wasn't spotted until months later. Investigators estimated he had walked between 12 and 14 miles before collapsing, likely not surviving more than 24 hours after getting lost.
Fred, as officials continue to search wooded areas much like this one here, I spoke to that sister. It was very emotional. She's out of state, but she says she wants her brother back home in North Carolina.
But how had he traveled so far, so quickly, in freezing conditions? It seemed like he had a plan, following the ditch in hopes of reaching safety. But when someone is cold, hungry, and scared, their decisions don't always make sense. Investigators believed it was just a tragic case of getting lost in the wilderness. But one question remained. What happened to Corey's shotgun? A new discovery. In 2009, a discovery made everything even more bizarre. A hunter, 39 miles away from where Corey's body was found, spotted something in a small patch of water. It was a shoe. Next to it, he found a blue jacket and a camera. When tested, these items were confirmed to belong to Corey. This raised even more questions. If Corey had somehow traveled there himself, he would have had to walk nonstop for 14 hours without rest or food. But that made no sense. His body had already been discovered in a completely different location. So how did his belongings end up so far away? Investigators hoped the camera might provide some answers. When the film was developed, the photos revealed something chilling. Some images were taken on October 16, 2006, the day Corey disappeared. But others were from the following day, proving he had survived at least 2 nights in the wilderness. At first, the photos seemed ordinary, pictures of trees, streams, and the vast forest. But some were much stranger. They showed deep, isolated parts of the woods, almost as if Corey had come across dens or nests. One image captured massive human-like footprints. Another showed what looked like the entrance to a large underground cave. All signs began to point to Bigfoot. The rest of the images were difficult to interpret, blurry and unsettling, as if Corey had been trying to photograph something but was too panicked to focus. If he was trying to leave clues about what happened to him, the images didn't provide many answers. Authorities stuck with the simplest explanation. He had died of hypothermia, and scavengers had scattered his belongings over time. But not everyone believed that. Missing 411. David Paulides, an investigator behind the Missing 411 project, found Corey's case especially strange. To him, it was yet another example of hunters vanishing under mysterious circumstances. According to David Paulides, some hunters who enter national parks report feeling watched or even stalked by something lurking in the wilderness. And in the case of Beltrami Forest, he had a theory, one that pointed to something far more unsettling. He suspected the culprit might have been the swamp ape, also called the skunk ape. If you've heard of Bigfoot, then you get the idea. It's a similar creature, except it's said to inhabit the lowland marshes of the southern U.S. It gets its name from the horrible stench it gives off, something witnesses say is so overpowering that it's impossible to ignore.
There's a figure right here, and it definitely appears to be a hominid shape. You see a head, what appear to be shoulders, and 2 arms, and possibly even 2 legs.
Reports describe the swamp ape as around 7 feet tall, slightly smaller than the Bigfoot seen in the northern U.S. and Canada. But some researchers believe it has unique survival tactics, hiding in underground caves or even underwater, making it nearly impossible to track. What makes it most distinctive, though, is the unbearable odor it releases, possibly from a special gland that helps it stay hidden. And that raised a chilling question. Could this have been what Corey smelled earlier? The strange scent he and Jim brushed off? One thing about Corey's disappearance has remained an enduring mystery. His rifle was never found. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to him. In his memory, a 39-mile trail running from central Beltrami Forest to Heron Lake was named the Kelly Trail. As for Jim, the friend who had been with Corey that day, the tragedy changed him forever. Racked with guilt over what happened, he eventually gave up hunting for good. As unbelievable as it sounds, this isn't the first time Bigfoot has been linked to strange disappearances and eerie death scenes. A similar legend exists far to the north, in Alaska, where entire villages have been abandoned under mysterious circumstances. Portlock, a once thriving settlement, is now nothing more than a ghost town. But why?
Portlock was cursed and Bigfoot's place and nobody goes there.
Overnight, everybody left.
The peaceful-looking village by the sea had a history that was anything but ordinary. People tried to live there for centuries, yet the town was abandoned not once, not twice, but 4 separate times. Unlike most ghost towns, Portlock wasn't just deserted because of economic struggles or shifting industries. The reason it was left to crumble felt much more sinister, almost as if the land itself was cursed. The first known outsider to visit the area was a British captain named Nathaniel Portlock in 1785. He gave the land its name, but his arrival also marked the start of a dark and chilling legacy, the haunting of Portlock. When Captain Portlock's crew arrived, they discovered signs of an old native village. It was clear that people had once lived there, but for some unknown reason, they had all vanished. This was puzzling. After all, the area had everything needed for survival. There was an abundance of animals, fish, and natural resources, and yet it had been completely abandoned. Despite the mystery, Portlock's crew decided to stay and establish a settlement. But it wasn't long before things took a dark turn. Crew members began falling ill, not just physically, but mentally as well. An eerie sense of dread seemed to settle over them, a fear so overwhelming that even the strongest among them couldn't shake it. Desperation grew. Some were too sick to work, while others were so terrified they refused to leave their shelters. Eventually, they couldn't take it anymore. The crew begged Captain Portlock to leave, and reluctantly, he agreed. They abandoned the land, leaving its secrets behind. But as strange and frightening as their stay was, they were not the first outsiders to experience something unexplainable here. 6 years before Portlock's arrival, a group of Spanish explorers had also attempted to settle in the area. Just like Portlock's crew, they found it odd that such a rich and bountiful land had been deserted by its original inhabitants. It wasn't long before they understood why. A strange illness spread through their ranks, accompanied by an unbearable, creeping fear. Then, the eerie cries began. At first, the sounds came from deep within the surrounding forests, but each night they grew closer. The unsettling wails filled the men with terror, making sleep impossible. One by one, the explorers lost their resolve. Some fell sick, others simply gave in to their fear. Eventually, they had no choice but to flee.
They're out looking for food, maybe raiding the campgrounds or sneaking around.
For generations, stories of Portlock's strange phenomena have kept people away. Whether it was the mysterious sickness, the chilling cries from the woods, or whispers of a creature lurking in the shadows, the place gained a reputation for terror. Even today, its legend remains one of Alaska's most haunting mysteries. And yet, the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Both Portlock and the Spanish explorers had faced harsh environments before. They had survived brutal weather, dangerous wildlife, and unforgiving landscapes. But something about this land was different. Something made even the bravest men abandon it in fear. A land of fear and mystery. For decades, the land remained untouched. Some speculated that infrasound, low-frequency sound waves known to cause nausea, dizziness, and fear, was responsible. Predators like tigers use it to paralyze prey, and sperm whales disorient their targets with it. If infrasound was behind Portlock's terror, something powerful was lurking in the forest. In 1867, a group of nomadic Sugpiaq natives attempted to settle there. The land was bountiful, filled with fish, clams, and game. But within weeks, they were under attack. These weren't rival tribes. The villagers claimed monstrous giants were hunting them, not for resources, but for flesh. Every night they came, tearing through homes with unimaginable brutality. Strangely, when wildlife was plentiful, the giants disappeared. But when food ran scarce, the attacks grew worse. The Sugpiaq fought back, but they couldn't win. By 1905, they abandoned Portlock for good, leaving behind terrifying stories of man-eating creatures. Years later, settlers returned. By 1930, Portlock had grown into a small town, and people began to feel safe. Until 1931, when a logger named Andrew Kamluck ignored warnings and ventured deep into the forest. When he didn't return, a search party was sent after him. What they found was horrifying. Kamluck's body was discovered with his head crushed by his own sled, a sled so heavy no human could have moved it alone. His sled dogs were shredded, and the sled itself had been flung far from the scene. The sheer brutality left the search party in shock. Whatever killed him had unnatural strength.
No matter how much proof you hand to the scientific community, they're not going to believe it until, like I said, they can do an autopsy on it.
As fear spread, more men vanished. Hunters disappeared, only to be found later, mutilated, decayed, or thrown into swamps. Whatever haunted Portlock had never left. Was it Bigfoot? A lost predator using infrasound? Or something else entirely? Whatever haunted Portlock drove people away time and time again. To this day, it remains one of Alaska's most chilling and unexplained mysteries.